My name is David, and I've been married to Laura for 17 years. We have two children, a son named Ethan and a daughter named Sophie. Lately, Laura has been coming home late from work with increasing regularity, and tonight was no exception. It was almost 10 p.m. The kids and I had already finished dinner and homework, and they had been tucked into bed for about an hour. They didn't even ask where their mom was or why she wasn't home. This was a new development, and it saddened me. I had spent the last hour going over our finances. Over the past 2 years, our financial situation had worsened significantly. Our income had dropped sharply, but Laura seemed oblivious to our financial woes, continuing to spend as if we had no concerns. It was as if she believed we had no financial problems at all. I had just finished paying our latest bills and figured we could scrape by for another couple of months. I had also been rethinking my life plan, wondering if I had made a mistake. For 2 years I had been staring at a looming issue, anticipating when it might finally catch up with us. I always thought it would, but now doubts were starting to creep in. I'm not sure how long she stood there watching me. Lately I'd been lost in my thoughts more often, causing me to lose track of time. Eventually, with her arms crossed and that all-too-familiar look of disapproval on her face, she spoke. "David, I want a divorce." In that moment, I wasn't entirely sure how to feel. My spirit was weighed down by self-doubt and self-loathing, almost numbing me to any new emotions. It wasn't exactly a funny situation, yet I found myself stifling a laugh. My wife, with whom I had shared 17 years, had just told me our relationship was ending, and everything we had built together was falling apart. It was a feeling I hadn't had in a while, and oddly enough, it almost brought a sense of relief. I looked at her briefly, allowing myself one last trip down memory lane to remember our happier times. Then, it was back to reality. I was better at programming than at managing. Unfortunately, in the corporate world, programmers often get promoted to project leaders, then department heads, and finally, senior management. That's how I ended up as the senior manager of product development, a title that sounded impressive but was basically just a glorified sales position. At the time, I was the most qualified person for the job. I had essentially created our flagship product line on my own, nurtured it through its early stages, and overseen its development through 6 upgrades. I knew our product inside and out. When customers had questions, I had the answers. When staff faced problems, I knew how to fix them. A new haircut and an expensive suit completed the image. When I was let go from Chicago Technology Solutions, it wasn't surprising. If I had been my own supervisor, I might have made the same decision. My attendance at meetings was sporadic at best, and we had missed too many deadlines. I wasn't intentionally trying to get fired, but I also didn't put much effort into keeping my job at CTS. I had been in a long slump. It took me nearly 3 months to climb out of my initial depression and try to move forward, but that attempt was a failure. Another month passed before I found a solution to my situation, or at least one I could live with. If it weren't for the kids, I might have lost my mind. Their well-established routine became my anchor, helping me regain a sense of positivity. The constant cycle of breakfast, school, snack, homework, dinner, and bedtime became my guiding principle, and slowly led me back to a more stable life. I fully embraced the role of stay-at-home dad, taking care of household chores, and driving the kids around. The children genuinely appreciated my increased presence at home, which made me realize that I still had value. I wasn't entirely worthless. If Laura noticed the change in our family dynamic, she never acknowledged it. I'm almost certain she didn't even recognize it. I first met Laura Johnson at a fraternity mixer. I had almost decided not to go. I had joined the fraternity mainly for the post-graduation opportunities it offered, not for the college parties. I thought I would need all the advantages I could get. My academic performance was excellent, so I wasn't worried about that. In every way, I was just average. Average height, weight, looks, and personality. But Laura was an average that looked much better on a woman. She was somewhat reserved and a bit of a wallflower. I watched her for a while before finally mustering the courage to start a conversation. Our initial exchange was brief and quiet, but we did introduce ourselves. Over the next few weeks, we met up for coffee and study sessions at the library. It was almost 2 months before we went on our first official date. From that moment on, my life was transformed into something extraordinary. We enjoyed 15 years of pure happiness. Our courtship was short, and our engagement even shorter. After graduating, We married and moved into our first apartment in Chicago. We commuted together on the morning and evening trains to our first jobs. Money was tight, but we faced it together. We shared almost everything in common: family backgrounds, dating histories, interests, and dreams. Where we differed, we be-Bryanced each other out. If there was something I wasn't good at, Laura excelled at it, and vice versa. I handled our finances effectively, while Laura managed our social and family schedules with expertise. We worked well together, and our lives quickly improved. In the following years, we both received several promotions, our circle of friends expanded, and we saved enough money to buy our first home. We also enjoyed traveling and entertainment. Our intimate life evolved naturally, starting with hand-holding and kisses on our first date, and gradually becoming more intimate as we became exclusive. 8 years into our marriage, Laura left her job when our son Ethan was born, and then our daughter Sophie arrived a little over a year later. We bought a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, got a dog, and added a family sedan and a minivan to our collection. Our lives seemed to be falling into place perfectly: 2 kids, a pet, a house, and 2 cars. It felt completely ordinary, and I thought I couldn't be any happier. But I was wrong. My promotion to manager came shortly after Sophie's first birthday. It felt like a reward for years of blending into the average crowd without complaints. My new salary was substantial, and we made sure not to take it for granted. I enjoyed flexible hours, mostly working from home and only going to the office for staff and management meetings. They say money can't buy happiness, and I agree. However, it can buy stylish clothes, personal grooming, better health care, a newer home in a nicer neighborhood, and boost your confidence. I went from being average to slightly above average. My wife, who I had always found beautiful, also transformed from average to something I now found incredibly attractive. Our already good bedroom life reached new heights. We traveled more comfortably, spent quality time with our children, and saved more for retirement. When Sophie started elementary school, Laura expressed a desire to return to part-time work. She quickly found a job at a startup marketing firm that she thought she'd enjoy. Her work schedule conveniently aligned with school drop-offs and pickups, which was a great addition. We didn't rely on her income, so we saved it. According to my calculations, we were on track to retire comfortably by the time our kids finished college. But 3 months before our 15th wedding anniversary, I accidentally stumbled upon evidence of Laura's affair, on my birthday no less. I actually discovered the clues 2 days before my birthday, but it took me a few weeks to piece everything together. Initially, I didn't think much of Laura's increased work hours. It just meant she'd be working a bit more each week, and I didn't mind picking up the kids from school. It didn't really disrupt my schedule. About 3 months into her new job, I noticed she seemed preoccupied more often, so I asked her about it. She said she was adjusting to her job and feeling stressed. To lighten her load, I decided to take on more responsibilities at home. When our once passionate bedroom life started to noticeably decline, we talked about it. She told me she was getting older and didn't feel the need for physical closeness as often. It was the first time I'd heard her use the F word, and while things did improve temporarily, our intimacy dipped again. I was hesitant to bring it up again, fearing an argument. I was almost at my breaking point when I discovered the gift. The weather had turned cooler, and I was searching for one of my sweaters. I had taken on the laundry duties and sometimes mixed up which closet the clothes should go in. While going through sweaters on her closet shelf, I found it hidden behind old shoe boxes. It was hard to miss: the unmistakable pink box with a white ribbon from the lingerie store. The card addressed to lover caught my attention and piqued my curiosity. I struggled internally for a moment, debating whether to open the box or wait. Ultimately, I couldn't resist and decided to open it. The idea of waiting until my birthday to enjoy my wife after reading the card seemed unbearable. Inside the box, Laura had left a note. "Please ignore the packaging. Unwrap your actual gift on your birthday, when I'll be wearing what's inside the box. You'll have my last bit of virginity. Love always, Laura." For the next 48 hours, I went above and beyond to make her feel special. I greeted her with flowers at the door, gave her a foot massage, and prepared her favorite dinner. Her reaction was not what I had hoped for. She seemed to merely tolerate my gestures, rather than appreciate them. On my birthday, I made sure the kids finished their homework early, so we wouldn't be interrupted. Laura came home late from work, and her question about dinner only added to my confusion. Nevertheless, I played along, eagerly anticipating my surprise. I suggested we go out for pizza, which excited the kids, so we headed out. Our waitress, in on the surprise, led the staff in singing "Happy Birthday" just before we left. I thought I saw a flicker of surprise in Laura's eyes, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "I'll give you your present later, David," she said with a grin. The drive home was tense, and I nearly had an accident. The 15 minutes of waiting for the kids to get ready for bed felt excruciating, and the next 15 minutes, waiting for them to fall asleep, were even worse. Fortunately, Laura came back from an emergency milk run shortly after the kids were asleep. When I reached our bedroom door, Laura was nowhere to be found. I sat on the bed, growing increasingly frustrated with the whole charade. When would I finally get my gift? She emerged from the bathroom dressed in a full-length flannel nightgown, her face bare of makeup, and her hair tied back. I was becoming quite irritated with the entire situation. When would the gift finally be presented? She climbed into bed, pulled up the covers, and reached for her bedside lamp, but then paused. "Oops, I almost forgot," she said. She retrieved a small square box wrapped in multicolored balloon paper from her nightstand drawer, the same paper we had used for David's last birthday. She handed it to me and said, "Happy birthday, dear." Then she rolled over, turned off her lamp, and went to sleep. I was too stunned to even open the gift. The next day, I was overwhelmed with depression. I replayed the events in my mind, trying to understand what had gone wrong. I felt lost and sank into despair for nearly 2 weeks. The gift seemed to taunt me, a constant reminder of my failure. I'd heard the cliches about the husband being the last to know, but I truly had no idea. The thought of Laura cheating on me never crossed my mind. However, that changed when she called home 13 days after my birthday, saying, "It's Brian's 30th birthday, and the staff is taking him out to celebrate. I might be home pretty late." I don't recall my response or even walking to the bedroom closet. I remember staring at the empty space where my present had been, and the intense pain in my chest that drove me to the bathroom to throw up. For longer than I care to admit, I feared I might be having a heart attack, and for a fleeting moment, I wished it were true as an escape from the pain. Brian Davis, Laura's boss, was a slick, somewhat sleazy-looking advertising executive a few years younger than Laura and me. I had met him only once, and remembered disliking him for his insincerity. Sophie's voice brought me back to reality. "Are you okay, Daddy?" she asked, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Daddy just ate something that upset his stomach. I'll be out in a minute. I need to clean up." Eventually, I emerged from the bathroom, though I don't recall much beyond that. I remember grabbing my dusty bottle of scotch. Given the headache I woke up with, I must have downed several glasses. I didn't know when Laura came home. When I saw her in the kitchen the next morning, feeding the kids, she seemed to be carrying on with her routine, as if nothing unusual had happened. It was a small wince on her face when she sat down to eat that shattered any remaining affection I had for her. It was subtle, but unmistakable. I wish I could say I confronted Laura about her cheating, but I didn't. I was devastated. I could only manage to move through the days, and things didn't improve for several weeks. I felt like a zombie. Each day, watching Laura go through the motions at home without a care made me feel progressively worse. I thought I had reached rock bottom. It wasn't until the weekend of our 15th wedding anniversary that I finally decided to take action. To be honest, I had been acting like a wimp. I knew it. And there's probably a psychological term for my behavior. If my dad were still alive, he'd call me a fool, and he'd be right. The fog began to lift from my mind when Laura mentioned that she'd be away for a work conference during our anniversary. I can't quite pinpoint why it struck me so deeply, but it felt like an extra jab of disrespect. Her complete disregard for our special day was a harsh blow. After drowning my sorrows in alcohol that night, I woke up with a burning anger, convinced I had hit my limit. I called my lawyer and set up an appointment, resolved to end this farce. I was sure my life couldn't sink any lower. I was wrong. The fierce determination I brought into the attorney's office quickly turned to crushing disbelief. I knew divorces could be complex, and I thought my wife's affair would tilt the scales in my favor. Instead, my lawyer methodically dismantled my case. I lacked solid evidence of the affair, and even if I had it, it wouldn't make much difference. Our assets would be split 50-50, and without proof that Laura was an unfit parent, shared custody was the most I could hope for. The disparity in our incomes worked against me too. I'd be on the hook for spousal support and child maintenance. Laura would likely get primary custody and stay in the house for the kids' sake. I felt like a fool, betrayed and powerless, while Laura seemed to be skating away with everything. I went from feeling despondent to utterly shattered. Even Laura noticed my state after a few weeks and inquired about it. "You seem really worn out, David. Is something bothering you?" I forced a smile and replied, "No, dear." At least she feigned concern while I drifted through life in a haze. Then I lost my job, although it took a while for me to realize it. Ironically, losing my job turned out to be a blessing in disguise. My unexpected source of hope came from an unlikely place, the evening news. I was absorbed in a series of grim stories that seemed to echo my mood. However, one story caught my attention. A major East Coast company had gone bankrupt. Its former employees were struggling to get their final paychecks and were anxious about their pensions. For once, I felt like someone else might be worse off than me. The news analyst pointed out that while employees might win a judgment, it wouldn't matter as the company had no money left. It didn't take long for me to connect the dots and hatch a plan. If there was no money, Laura couldn't claim what didn't exist. If we had nothing, we'd split nothing. Yes, I'd be sacrificing my share, but since I was already going to lose half, did the rest even matter? I devised a straightforward plan. I was unemployed and had no intention of job hunting. I decided to deplete our savings until there was nothing left. I admit it was a reckless move, and even I had doubts about its success, but it was a goal I could cling to. 2 years felt like an eternity. It was unbearably dull, especially since I was alone most of the time. It became clear that Laura had been the social glue of our friend group. As she distanced herself from me, I realized how few strong friendships I had. Being an only child with both parents gone at a young age left me isolated. I won't bore you with a detailed account of those years. To sum it up, it was a miserable 2 years. The only bright spot was my children. Before this, I'd never splurged on anything frivolous. I was meticulous about tracking every expenditure. I started making small weekly cash withdrawals and stashing the money away. After a couple of months, it dawned on me that we weren't depleting the funds fast enough to make a significant impact. I was good at saving but not so skilled at spending, so I decided to escalate my plan. I enrolled in an executive MBA program at a pricey local university, costing nearly $120,000. I paid $60,000 in cash for a new luxury SUV. I also fully funded educational savings accounts for my kids, which set me back another $260,000. I indulged in a new wardrobe and began making large cash withdrawals twice a week. Interestingly, I rarely used the money for gambling. I spent a little here and there just to keep entertained, but most of the cash went into a wall safe in our garage, serving as my personal post-divorce emergency fund. Another significant expenditure was hiring full-time surveillance on Laura and her lover. I opted for a comprehensive package, including video footage, photos, and a daily log of their activities. I'm somewhat embarrassed about the cost of that service. Did Laura notice my spending spree? She did, though not the gambling. I had to tell her about the money transfers for the kids' custodial accounts because I needed her signature. She also saw the new car and clothes, but she never mentioned them. I'm pretty sure she believed I was still working and that we were maintaining our comfortable lifestyle. She made a few purchases herself, which I didn't question. I often wondered who was benefiting from her more frequent lingerie buys, but it was a subject we never broached. We maintained a polite but distant relationship, interacting daily as if we were merely indifferent roommates. Our intimacy had long vanished from our marriage. Spending time with my children was the highlight of my life. I made it a point to support their interests, whether it was tackling homework together or enjoying games. We relished outings to parks, bike rides, and movie nights. Taking on the role of the house chef, my kids showed an interest in cooking and eagerly joined me in trying out simple recipes. Laura was usually around during the week, but I neither excluded her from family activities nor made an effort to include her. If she chose to join us, it was on her own accord. I received a weekly update on Laura's activities. Initially, I suspected she was seeing her boss, but it turned out she had been with several men from her office. As time went on, even clients from her company started making their way into her social calendar. Did it hurt? Not really. My opinion of her was already low, so the confirmation didn't change much. The reports were mundane. The videos were poorly shot and failed to engage me. I was surprised to find that Brian Davis, despite having the opportunity to be with several women, wasn't particularly skilled. Given the gift she had bought, I assumed he and Laura were in a serious relationship, but it seemed more like casual encounters. Brian, despite his modest size, interacted with her, and she went along with it. The same applied to most of the other men involved with Laura. However, one client, a bookish-looking guy with glasses and a pocket protector, seemed particularly zealous with her. The footage was too grainy to determine if she enjoyed it, but it appeared somewhat uncomfortable to me. About a year into this ordeal, I realized I hadn't found any pleasure in it. It was just another addition to my misery. After a year, I decided to terminate the surveillance. I had seen enough, and reviewing the material had become a tedious chore filled with trivial details. Despite juggling classes, caring for the kids, and my gambling habits, I had plenty of free time. I began contemplating what life might be like after my marriage, which I assumed would eventually end. I started a new exercise regimen. While I had always been in decent shape, I made noticeable progress with my bench press and running stamina. Although I didn't believe that building a great physique was solely about genetics, I was satisfied with my appearance. I also took an interest in the latest developments in my former industry, anticipating that I would need a job eventually. Being away for a year had set me back more than I expected. I dedicated a few hours each day to learning about new technologies and software. I focused particularly on my old company, CTS. They were stagnant, stable revenues, and no significant progress. In the tech industry, stagnation often equates to decline. Additionally, I invested time in researching divorces. I explored various strategies for dealing with my soon-to-be ex-wife, but spent most of my time studying how divorce impacts children. Having worked through much of my own pain with the help of my children, I wanted to ensure that when the transition came, I would be well prepared. There's a wealth of information available, though I found a lot of it less than helpful. Update 2. About 8 months into this phase, I began feeling uneasy. Laura started coming home at regular times and engaged in conversations about my day. I kept my responses brief, but she continued to press. She began dressing more provocatively for bedtime, as if trying to rekindle the intimacy we once shared. Things took a turn for the worse over the following weeks. After a year and a half of distance and routine, she started lamenting our lack of communication and suggested working on our marriage. I responded with complete silence. Her attempts at reconciliation persisted until her birthday. I left her gift on the dining room table, wrapped in the same paper she had used for my last gift. The contents shouldn't have been surprising. It took me 6 months to open her last gift to me, a cheap digital watch. When I found a similar watch in the impulse buy section of a local convenience store for $9.95, I felt a pang of irritation. However, when I noticed a matching ladies' model, my resentment faded. I bought it and waited 18 months to give it to her. I almost wish I could have seen her reaction, but unfortunately, I wasn't around when she opened it. The kids and I had an impromptu movie night that went late, and by the time we woke up the next day, she had already left. Everything quickly reverted to my new normal. Laura started spending increasingly more time at the office, and our communication at home became minimal. Then, the inevitable happened. "David, I want a divorce." I had hoped she would finalize it swiftly, but it took nearly a week before I received her divorce petition. I found it almost amusing. The petition included demands for spousal and child support, an uneven division of assets in her favor, and cited mental and emotional cruelty as reasons. I decided to delay taking the kids camping until the following Monday, wanting to keep them away from the tension at home. When we returned 6 days later, feeling refreshed, we were greeted by Laura waiting for us at home. She was alone in the living room, looking unwell. I wondered which of my actions had taken her by surprise. In response to her petition, I had filed for divorce myself, citing adultery and seeking the house, our primary asset, along with full custody of the children. I also requested spousal and child support, given my 2 years of unemployment and full-time childcare. Additionally, I had initiated alienation of affection lawsuits against Laura's 7 sexual partners, though I had little expectation of winning. I also filed civil suits against her employer and the companies of 3 clients who had been involved with her. While I didn't anticipate winning, I hoped the negative publicity might tip things in my favor. I sent a DVD containing incriminating evidence of Laura's affairs to her parents and her best friend, making it clear I wasn't afraid to use it. Although all the evidence was already part of my countersuit, I wanted to eliminate any possibility of leniency. The kids grabbed a snack and went to their rooms to prepare for bedtime, barely acknowledging their mother. Laura made no effort to engage with them. I headed to the fridge for a beer and then took a seat in the chair opposite Laura in the living room. Oh, Laura, I don't hate you. Hatred requires effort, and frankly, I haven't expended any effort on you. All my energy is devoted to taking care of myself and my children. But I am your wife. Stop. I won't tolerate someone like you tarnishing my wife's good name. My wife was a loving, caring woman, my closest friend and partner, and the mother of my children. She's gone. You've taken her place, but don't act as if you have any connection to me. It took a long time before she finally spoke again. What should I do now? She asked. Is that a rhetorical question, or do you genuinely want my advice? I didn't wait for a response. You have a few options. You could move far away and start over. That's what I'd do if I were in your shoes. I'll never let my children spend significant time with you, so you might as well leave. Alternatively, you could stick around. Try to keep your head high, but who knows who will hear about your little escapades, or who would want to hire someone with your reputation. You might find someone willing to accept you, but what kind of person would that be? Lastly, you could reflect on your actions. I hope you don't choose that path, as it would deny me the pleasure of witnessing your suffering, just as you deserve. But then again, I'm not sure my opinion matters to someone as foolish as you. It certainly didn't matter when you chose to get involved with your boss. I had imagined delivering that speech for months. I should have felt satisfaction. While watching her spirit crumble under the weight of my words, I expected to find some measure of contentment. Instead, I felt hollow. Final update. Life after the divorce had its ups and downs. I fared better with my lawsuits than expected, receiving just over $1 million in settlements from the 3 companies whose employees had been involved with my ex-wife. It was surprising because my lawyer had advised me not to expect much. After reevaluating the situation, we concluded that the companies wanted to avoid the negative publicity that had followed my ex-wife's company. We had used legal tactics, discovery motions, depositions, and media leaks to dismantle her company. I also subtly campaigned by reaching out to the CEOs of their remaining clients, providing details about my wife, her boss, and their illicit activities. I asked them if they really wanted to stay associated with companies tied to such scandals. Gradually, their revenues declined, employees left, and ultimately, the company went bankrupt. Brian Davis was dismissed and left town in disgrace. The $200,000 settlement from Brian, while smaller compared to my other victories, was particularly satisfying. I didn't receive anything from my alienation of affection lawsuits as expected, but 4 of the wives involved secured significant settlements in their subsequent divorces. It wasn't all celebration and happiness. I also endured some suffering during this process. Encounters with people aware of my situation were frequent, and the mocking and teasing were intense for a while. I couldn't decide whether it was fortunate or unfortunate that I didn't really care about the taunts and insults thrown my way. I already felt like a failure, so the barbs from others barely registered. Some of the remarks were surprisingly clever, but they barely affected me. I managed to shield my children from most of the negativity. Their well-being had always been my top priority. They were upset for a time, but bounced back quickly. My greatest victory came with my return to CTS as the Vice President of Design and Development. Seeking a distraction from my personal turmoil, I dove back into programming. During those 2 challenging years, I developed an add-on for CTS's primary software, enabling seamless integration with 2 popular software packages from rival companies. I founded my own company to market this innovation. Within a year, all 3 companies made offers to acquire my company and my software. I ended up selling my company for $11 million and received an outstanding compensation package from CTS. At one point, I considered retiring, but given my almost non-existent social life, I feared becoming a recluse if I didn't find a reason to leave the house every day. With my newfound wealth, I hired a kind elderly lady, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, as a part-time housekeeper and nanny. She eventually became a full-time resident, living in the guest suite above the garage in our new home. Mrs. Carter played a grandmotherly role to my children, warm and gentle, yet firm when needed. Her life experience provided invaluable guidance. I cherished my children and strived to be a supportive and caring father. Yet I remained emotionally scarred and cynical. I turned to Mrs. Carter for advice on decisions, finding her insights comforting. As the children grew into well-adjusted adults, I saw them occasionally and met their families. Unfortunately, our closeness diminished over time. I harbored no grudges. It was better for me to keep my bitterness at bay and maintain some distance from their lives. Mrs. Carter worked for me until the kids went off to college, after which she retired. I provided her with free accommodations and meals as part of her pension. She had been a constant presence in my life for 15 years. Despite her efforts to encourage me to live fully and find a companion, she passed away knowing that I would remain alone. I never opened up to anyone again. My friendships remained superficial, and my dating life was practically non-existent, limited to a few group outings arranged by casual acquaintances. I earned a reputation as a cold-hearted, ruthless individual not to be crossed. Most people avoided me, and I could hardly blame them. My wealth allowed me to manage my sexual needs adequately. I maintained a rotation of call girls, compensating them generously for their time and services, and had casual encounters before sending them on their way. One girl, Ruby, later revealed to be Mary Beth, stood out. She was passionate and seemed to develop a genuine connection with me. However, I couldn't bear the thought of burdening her with my emotional baggage. When I sensed she was becoming too attached, I ended the relationship. As for Laura, she faced her own set of challenges. For nearly a year, she made efforts to contact me, though I wasn't sure why. Did she hope for reconciliation, or was she seeking a relationship with my children? It was possible, but I had made my stance clear. I initiated surveillance on her when she attempted to stay in Chicago. Whenever she applied for a job, I ensured her complete work history followed her. When she started dating, I sent care packages to her potential partners, detailing her past. I didn't care whether they chose to stay with her after learning the truth. I wanted to make sure she couldn't escape her past. One prospective partner, fueled by liquid courage, showed up at my doorstep and physically pushed me. It was a grave mistake. Despite my lack of martial arts or special forces training, and never having been in a physical altercation before, I was overwhelmed by a surge of rage, a deep-seated hatred for my wife and her lovers. Unfortunately, he became the target of my fury. I ended up with a noticeable black eye, and he was fortunate to survive. He pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault and unlawful entry, receiving probation as a first-time offender. The years of reconstructive surgery and rehabilitation had a lasting impact on him. Laura never reached out to me again. After an additional year of monitoring her activities, I ceased my surveillance. She had secured steady employment cleaning rooms at a highway hotel in a town approximately 700 miles away, deep in the backwoods of Virginia. The only time I saw Laura again was 16 years later, at my daughter's wedding. I knew that my children had reconnected with Laura several years after graduating from college, and I had made no effort to impede their search for her. Time had not been kind to her. She had gained at least 20 pounds, and deep wrinkles around her lips and other signs of recent smoking were evident. Overall, she looked aged and worn out. Yet, despite everything, I still recognized the woman to whom I had once given my heart. I felt nothing for her now, but I did recognize her. At the wedding, Laura sat alone in the back of the church in the bride section. Her interaction with my daughter was brief, polite, and somewhat reserved. She made no effort to engage with me. Throughout the night, we remained separated by no more than 30 feet. By the end of the evening, she was waiting outside for a cab. When I noticed the small gold band with a tiny diamond on her left ring finger, a rare smile crossed my face. Maybe she had fared better than me, given the ring. I sauntered in her direction, letting my gaze linger on the ring. As I lifted my eyes to meet hers, I saw a profound sadness in her expression. "Just so you know," I said, "you were the one who ruined my life first." I glanced at her left hand, then back into her eyes. "I'm genuinely glad you found someone. I hope he brings you happiness." I turned on my heel and walked briskly to my car, where my driver was waiting attentively. "Good evening, Mr. Thompson. I trust you had a pleasant evening, sir? Shall we head to the club?" "It went as well as I could have expected, Jonathan. Let's go straight back to the house. I think I'd like to be alone tonight." "Certainly, sir." As we drove away, I made a conscious effort not to look back. though I caught a glimpse of her brief wave. Farewell.